In this lesson, we're going to give you a brief introduction into mixing techniques. Now, it's very, very basic, but when you come to doing this, you kind of have to have 5 things in your head. 5 things that you pretty much have to do to every single channel, okay? So it's going to take you a little bit of time to master this if you're only just starting out. But if you keep these 5 things in your head and you think, actually, every single channel, I've got to have a look at these things, you're on the right path. So the 5 things that you have to look at. Firstly is volume, secondly is panning, thirdly is EQ, and then fourth is compression, and then finally is reverb, okay? So volume, panning, EQ, compression, and reverb. So those are the 5 things we're just going to delve into ever so briefly here, just to give you an idea of where they are and how to apply it, okay? It's important to notice that this is just a very basic introduction. This is quite a complex task, and as you go through, you'll kind of build up your own techniques for how to do this. So just kind of delve into it and just make you think about the 5 things that you have to do to pretty much every single channel. Okay, so let's just take volume first. Volume's a nice, easy one. So volume in Ableton is this dial here, and you can turn volume all the way down or all the way up. So let's just show you that. So by dragging it down, you can see this red line indicates that it's being turned down. Now, the optimal value for volume is 0 dB, okay? So 0 dB is right there. And that just gives you a bit of headroom above that point, but generally when you're mixing, you're looking for that 0 dB. So it starts there, and I tend to say to my students, actually, you want to bring that volume down before you bring it up, okay? Because what the tendency is you go to the master track, which is down here, and then you start creeping this down or creeping this up. If you leave the master track at 0 dB and then think all of these tracks before you get to 0 dB over on the master track should be below 0 dB, okay? And you're trying to keep that maximum volume below that. That may have gone completely over your head. A rule of thumb with that is bring the volume down before you take it up, okay? And that will just kind of guarantee that you give yourself enough headroom for when you finally come to bouncing down and mastering. So there's your volume. Next thing, so set at 0 dB by pressing 0 and then enter. Next thing we have on our list is panning. Panning is this dial here. Now when you're making your tracks, you're going to want to think, actually, we're looking at spatial awareness, and it's the same with volume. So each track has to kind of intertwine with each other, and it's the same with panning. You can say, okay, this track has got a bit of ADT on it, so I'm going to pan it off slightly to the left. This track, which is my double, doesn't, and I'm going to pan it slightly off to the right, and then you're giving it just that little bit of separation, okay? Rule of thumb is vocals go down the middle, and everything else, say vocals, bass guitar and bass drum go straight down the middle in the center, and everything else fits around that, okay? So let's just reset that. So there's the first 2 things. We have volume and panning, okay? And once you start dealing with that, you're going to find that you give yourself so much more space. Okay, next thing on my list is EQ. So how to apply EQ. Remember from one of our previous lessons that we had inserts and send effects. Now EQ has to be done as an insert, okay? So it has to be applied to each of the channels. So let's go to this guitar and let's just apply it. The EQ that I've chosen to apply is this EQ8. Now if you drill down, you've got a few different things that you can kind of start with. So different kind of instruments that you might want to EQ for, different kind of drums and so on. Let's just double click on the blanket one with no presets, okay? So double click and you'll see that it's added itself here. Now a really nifty button on this particular EQ is this little play icon. If you toggle this, it makes it so much bigger and you can actually see what's going on. So that's just this button here. So we've got an 8 parametric EQ here, of which so far you can just see 4. Now this first one is the high pass filter, this one here is the low pass filter, and then in between we just have our band pass filters, okay? You don't need to know that, but we're just giving you some terminology just to play with. So if we click on these and drag them around, you can see we can kind of do all kinds of things. With the high pass filter, you'll see as I drag it through, it just gets rid of all of these low frequencies, just leaving the high frequencies in place, getting rid of the low frequencies, okay? And that's kind of how that filter works. And with the low pass filter, it's exactly the opposite. So you drag that down and you can see it gets rid of all these high frequencies, leaving all the low frequencies intact. Now the bandpass filters work slightly differently. They create these kind of like U shapes. So as you pull it up, and if you come down to where it says Q here, the higher the number, the tighter the band, okay? So if we make that a lot higher, you'll see it just gives us a nice tight Q factor. Now if we press play, we have a visual representation of what the audio is actually doing within the frequency field. So let's just press play and see what's happening. So straight away we could probably get rid of a lot of these high frequencies. Not that many. And we could probably boost some of these up a little bit. Just showing you the different kind of textual values. But when you do come to doing this, unless you're going for something weird and wonderful, you are looking for things that are very subtle. My first port of call is just to cut the frequencies that I don't want, okay? So there's EQ in a nutshell. Next on my list is compression, and I do tend to apply the EQ first and then apply the compression afterwards. Now we have a few compressors in here. We have the basic compressor, which is just your kind of standard one, or we have this new glue compressor, if I can find it. So glue compressor is here, and this is a really nice compressor. So we've got one set up for guitar. So let's go lead solo note. Let's have this one. Okay, and let's just see what that's done to our sound. And remember, we can bypass them by pressing this button. I'm not going to go into all the settings on the compressor, but have a little play about with it. If you need to know more, you can go to their documentations and get some nice documentation from that. Finally on my list is reverb. Now reverb, we looked at this before, and I just tend to apply a little bit of reverb to all of my channels. And this, so remember we're on A here, and if we press this one, you can see we just apply a little bit of reverb. And this is just quite nice, just to kind of give it that kind of spatial sound. So when you're looking for separation in your mixes, just adding a bit of reverb to each of the tracks will just make them all gel together a bit more, okay? So here's my track as is. So, I mean, very basic. I could do a lot more with that, obviously, but I just wanted to introduce you to the 5 things. So we've got volume, panning, EQ, compression, and reverb. Okay, those are the things that we need to think about when we come to mixing. So have a little play around with those. Don't worry too much if it's gone completely over your head. I literally just wanted to introduce you to some basic mixing techniques.